Just get some quick housekeeping out of the way. First of all, always have to disclose this meeting is being recorded. So just for disclosure, as well as if anybody would like a copy of this, for anybody that couldn't make it today. If there's any Q&A, just go ahead and post that in the box. And we definitely want to tend to any questions. We'll keep things moving here, but we will tend to the Q&A as we go, and then also at the end. And then please stick around. At the end, we will have a quick survey. If you could fill that out, it would be much appreciated. So with that, I think let's go ahead and dive into it. So first of all, wanted to welcome everybody and thank you for joining us for our first inaugural last call. So today we'll be addressing how to secure the workforce. We're hosting today with our two close partners, Palo Alto and Evolve Security. And featuring Virginia Distillery for our tasting today. So I definitely see a lot of familiar faces and names on the line, but let's start out with a quick introduction of who I am and what Sanity is all about, and then we'll get into the fun stuff. So for those of you that haven't worked with Sanity before, we were founded in 2004 here in Denver. We've grown with the city, so grown a lot within the metro area and across the state, and then across the mountain region, into the Midwest, and we work with customers, all over the country on projects now all over the world. So if anybody that has worked with us can attest, we're not like your typical kind of transactional bar or reseller. We're all about kind of creating an experience, right? So it starts with building relationships and trust. Then kind of designing thoughtful solutions based on the information we know about our customers' environments, and then just ultimately creating, like I said, an experience. It's not a transactional thing like here's what you need, good luck with it. We work with you for the whole process and really develop lasting relationships, 10, 15 years, relationships with a lot of our customers. I think one thing worth calling out that's kind of a core foundation that our president and CEO kind of instilled in the company from the start was honesty, integrity, and ethics, and I think that really resonates with our partners and our customers, and it's just kind of the way we do business. And ultimately, maybe one of the most important parts in any type of business is, knowing what we're talking about, especially when it comes to, the technical components of the solutions we're designing. And then just doing what we say we're going to do. So executing, following up, hitting your timelines, and always listening to your requirements. So that's kind of what Sanity is all about. As far as the solutions we work with our customers on, our roots are in the data center. So we started really focused on server storage network for production and disaster recovery. Over the past 17 years now, we've developed a lot of other focused practices within virtualization, data protection, cloud. Security has been our biggest focus over the last number of years, and just kind of looking at things holistically, right? We work with our customers and get so much good information about what they're trying to do as an IT group and as an organization that it just makes sense for us to be able to kind of work on a lot of these projects holistically rather than siloed within just certain initiatives. Beyond the technology solutions we work with our customers on, there's some operational benefits of working with Sanity. Whether it's logistics and you need this gear at this site on this day, if there's any international shipping or logistics, that can be a real nightmare, and we have teams that can handle and make that all smooth for your staff. Any type of maintenance, renewals, asset tracking, things like that. When you have thousands of devices at hundreds of locations all over the country, all over the world, things can get tricky. So any kind of logistics and things like that. And just really kind of, like I said, tailoring this whole experience. It's not a product. When you work with Sanity, you get a whole experience and a whole team of people that are here to help you with kind of every moving piece of the project. And like I said, over the last number of years, the biggest focus for us has been, building out a security practice. So this team is led by, on a sales side, by Danielle Shalansky, and on an engineering side by Atom Arad. And it's been a big focus. We've signed on, a number of best in breed partners across all the different pillars. It's just security is so multifaceted that it takes really a number of partners that are really good at each kind of piece of the puzzle to get there. So, and like I said, kind of looking holistically now within security, building out all these different pillars, and the security landscape's always evolving, right? So today we are focused on security on today's topic. with our friends at Palo Alto. They kind of address those first two columns, your traditional networking security, as well as now with an endpoint, IoT, cloud is huge for them. Really, it's just a huge, robust portfolio for Palo Alto. And then our friends at Evolve, which they kind of address the right side of the chart here with, pen testing and vulnerability testing, risk and compliance, security ops, incident response, et cetera. Training is huge these days, making sure that not only you have the right tools, but you know how to use them, and all the industry best practices and standards. So with that, want to hand it off to a bunch of people much smarter and better versed than I am. We'll start with Atom on our team. He's going to kind of go over the evolving landscape within the security space, kind of what's important, and get into the topic we're talking about today.
Thanks, Keith. I appreciate that. Hello everyone. My name is Eitam Arad. I've been with Sanity almost for a year now, and I lead the security practice on the technical side. As you all know, we have Evolve Security and the Palo Alto networks as speakers today. So I'm going to provide a quick intro and lay out some foundations here. So with that, I will just jump right into it. So the IT industry has been and still going through a massive transformation throughout the last decade. It started off with cloud technology becoming mainstream, as we could, witness how public cloud platforms such as Azure, AWS, and Google are taking over the market. Once public cloud platforms became mainstream, it then enabled the SaaS market to, emerge, as we witness how SaaS offerings are becoming the role model from an architecture standpoint. Today, an average organization, and that number had probably changed already, but an average organization has about 350 cloud applications in place. A great example would be the Office 365 SaaS applications, Teams, OneDrive, SharePoint, that are taking a significant portion of our daily operations today. Mobile devices had become a corporate tool, that is often used more than traditional desktops and laptops, as mobile has surpassed desktop as the primary way to access the internet. The modern workforce is becoming remote too, while more and more organizations are adopting a work from home culture, as the global mobile workforce expected to reach 1.8 billion workers by 2022. Obviously, the last year had, accelerated this process significantly, as we all know, with COVID and all that good stuff. Lastly, technology has evolved in a way that allows almost any user with basic IT knowledge to access information and tools that significantly impacts the ability to launch an attack. While back at the good old days, it used to require a lot of unique knowledge and resources. Therefore, it was, way more difficult to execute. This transformation is inevitable eventually. Therefore, it introduces new challenges and problems, such as platform as a service and software as a service security. When relying on PaaS and SaaS, eventually we don't own the entire IT infrastructure that hosts our assets and transfers our data. We don't have full control over its security posture, and eventually it could cause, lots of issues. Some examples are employees working from home, public cloud, as well as SaaS applications. We consume it, but we don't really have control over it. So that poses a significant risk. Shadow IT. Now that resources and assets are spread around our home networks, offices, data centers, and cloud providers, knowing what we have and where had became a significant challenge. Obviously, you can protect something if you don't know it's there. Mobile devices security. Mobile devices are running dedicated operating systems, as we all know, such as Android and iOS. Therefore, they're prone to different types of attacks, which requires a different set of tools to effectively manage risk. Network security with no perimeter. That's one of my favorites, actually. I think this one probably had the most significant impact on the way we experience IT these days. So I'll go over and touch that one really quick. Once the traditional perimeter, which used to be the office, data center, and so on, does not exist anymore, and users are working remotely from random locations, gaining visibility into network traffic to allow threat detection, triaging, and remediation had become a serious challenge. Therefore, our traditional perimeter security tools doesn't really work anymore. These challenges, along with some additional ones, have significant impact on the way we're used to consume traditional IT, which means that the most common types of attack services are evolving, which leads us to my next thought. Excuse me. We must change and adapt the way we perceive and consume IT and security as a whole, and start focusing on the data, users, and everything that connects them versus focusing just on the secured perimeter. Now that we understand the challenges, we can discuss in high level some potential solutions to address them. The first one would be zero trust. Implementing a zero trust architecture is one way to do that. Zero trust is a security concept which is centered on the belief that organizations should not automatically trust anything inside or outside its perimeters, and instead must verify anything and everything trying to connect to its systems before granting access. Defense in depth, or DID. Defense in depth is an approach rather than a concept in cybersecurity, in which a series of defensive mechanisms are layered in order to protect valuable data and assets. We could also lay out this concept in a more simplified way. We can just look at it as having redundant controls that are focused on a specific security requirement. And in case one fails, the other takes over. Visibility, very important. Gaining visibility into end user and network traffic is crucial to be able to detect, triage, and remediate threats. Visibility also enables artificial intelligence and machine learning to detect unknown and zero-day threats. After all, again, we cannot address a situation if we don't know it is happening. Automation. Leveraging security solutions that automate triaging and remediation is crucial, since we cannot always rely on the human element to respond when needed. And the last one would be education. Excuse me, which is one of my favorites too. That one is probably the most, I guess we could say, ignored aspect in the security industry. It is a fundamental piece of every cybersecurity program for every type of organization. We could implement all the technical controls available to us, and still the human element could potentially create havoc. Security-related training should be customized according to the organization's budget, goals, risk appetite, and target audience to make sure it fits like a glove. Because if that's not the case, it won't be efficient, and it won't be able to provide lots of value to the organization.
Hey, Tom, I think you muted.
Oh, I apologize. I'd like to create some additional clarity around Sanity's approach here. First and foremost, we pick and choose our vendors and partners. Unlike the larger, three-letter resellers, we focus on quality versus quantity. We are always going through a comprehensive evaluation process, just like a customer, right? Both on the business and technical aspects, in order to ensure that we find the best in breed and it will be a perfect fit that will enable us to provide the most value to our customers. Then, once we understand what tools we have available, we provide a holistic solution by putting all the pieces together. We are focusing on building strategic relationships versus just transactional, where we establish ourselves as trusted advisors and able to provide top-notch advisory, regardless if we're making money or not. And that's a true story. These, in my opinion, are the main key differentiators between Sanity Solutions and the larger three-letter resellers. That is our fuel that drives us and enables us to provide a legendary customer experience. We chose Evolve Security and Palo Alto Networks as speakers on this event because they operate in a similar fashion like Sanity, where their core values are accountability, education, excellence, integrity, social responsibility, and teamwork. Their services and solutions all together create a holistic approach to cybersecurity, which allows them to shine and show value where other people or other companies can't. And as well, they provide profound expertise, and they're also really fun to work with. So to sum it up, they are basically a part of our approach to solving the problem. With that, I will pass the mic to Landon from Palo Alto. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ito. Appreciate it. I'm Landon Harsh, Palo Alto Networks. I'm SE for the company. I've been with Palo Alto Networks for just over 5 years now. It's been quite a ride through that time. A lot has changed. You know, you will see as we go through some of this presentation, some very similar talking points to what was just brought up, and I think that's a testament to Sanity's, you know, being very in touch with the security industry and having some great expertise there. So today, rather than doing kind of a broad portfolio overview of Palo Alto Networks, we're going to talk very specifically about our Secure Access Service Edge offering, pronounced as SASE. This is a Gartner quadrant that has been released recently, a category that they have released, and really starts to envelop CASB offerings that you might have heard of with the secure network services and offering other security services in the cloud, kind of all mashed together. So CASB was really a big term, you know, 2-3 years ago, and how do we secure our SaaS apps and all of those kinds of things. And while that is still very important, it's really been folded into what is termed as SASE now. So we're going to focus primarily on our offering in this space. We'll talk about a few different things, and if you have any questions as we're going through it, please drop them into the Q&A panel. We've got some folks there that will moderate that a bit, and I will follow up on answers after we're done presenting and get to some of the later portions here. So with that, I'm going to just spend a really brief time on some of these challenges that we're experiencing, because like I said, some of them were already touched on just now. So really things have changed exponentially over the last year. You know, companies that didn't traditionally have work from home forces had to go that way, right? And a lot of folks were really scrambling to figure out how to do that and how to do it in a secure manner. So that was a major change that affected a broader community of the workforce than would normally have happened in that condensed time. Cloud adoption has really also changed the way we have to secure business. We used to see, you know, years and years ago, people going to the cloud in an effort to try and save money, and we know today that that's not entirely realistic. That's certainly not in all use cases, but there are significant advantages to being in the cloud, and we see very large companies continuing to leverage the cloud where it makes sense. And so securing that is very important. We've got more and more devices out there all the time, and many of those are IoT devices that are not particularly intelligent and are certainly very rarely patched. Those are devices that are often released with many vulnerabilities present from day one. And then on top of all of this, you know, we've got brilliant attackers. If only we could take these people and harness them for good, we'd really have something on our hands. But the attackers are very smart and doing very interesting things, and keeping up with that requires a lot of expertise, a lot of different types of expertise. And going back to some of the things that were mentioned earlier, like defense in depth, critical to securing all of the threats that are occurring today. So just speaking to the challenge a little bit more, if we go back in time, let's say to the maybe early 90s, late 80s, this is kind of what we had at best, right? We had an office, we had a data center somewhere, maybe, and we had an internet connection of some kind, usually. This is that perimeter that was being spoken of, right? And that perimeter is gone as we know it, right? So just stepping through this a little bit, mobile really introduced the perimeterless office, where we have more and more folks with mobile devices working from various places around the world. And so, in that time, remote access VPN became important because, hey, I need access to the things in the data center, right? And that's where VPN really started. And it's how many folks still view VPN today is, well, I just need access to private things in my data center or in my offices. I think you'll see as we go through this, we have a fundamentally different approach to VPN and always have since the company existed. We view it as something much more than just access to those private resources. But with all this mobile going on, we had now unsecured traffic from those mobile devices going out. And maybe we introduce some kind of a proxy or a secure gateway to hopefully wrangle some of that traffic, but that doesn't address everything. It only addresses web-based traffic, and a lot of traffic is not web-based, so that leaves a huge gap. As we've gone forward, we've had things like MPLS come into play, where now we have very effective quality business grade lines that we can attach our offices to our data centers and offices to offices, et cetera, et cetera. We also started doing our own VPNs with things like DMVPN and other technologies around that kind of thing. And then the public cloud came to be, and we had all of these SaaS services that are being hosted on the web, which introduced a need for CASB for securing SaaS, and how do I secure my public cloud? And then we said, well, MPLS is really expensive and the general internet's getting really good. So then we started developing SD-WAN technologies, and then IoT dropped in billions of devices around the world that simply aren't secure, right? So what we end up with now is this mangled octopus of links and lines going all over the place that really do need to be secured, and it gets complicated. So we took a step back and we said, look, we've already got really good security, network security services. How do we apply that more broadly? And so we released a product called Prisma Access. This has been in the market for about 3 years, over 3 years probably now, in production, and very, very effective. This solution really aims to simplify that mangled mess of connectivity and provide a much more seamless security experience, and one that really aims to keep the user experience good as well, which is critical. So this actually folds very nicely into the new Gartner Quadrant SASE, but was around long before that was even a category. And so the idea here is that we offer network as a service. So we have the ability to tie into ours or other players' SD-WAN. We have the ability to provide QoS and provide very accelerated network access across this infrastructure worldwide. And at the same time, apply security as a service as well on top of that traffic that is flowing through, which we've done for years and years with our firewall products and other products that we have on the market today. And so, truly what this becomes is those services running in public cloud, able to provide network services and security services centrally for mobile users, tying your branches in, tying your data centers in, and giving kind of really one central location that is the security boss. So all traffic flows to Prisma Access for inspection and enforcement, and then egresses directly from there to wherever it should go, be that public cloud Okay, it's hosted in public cloud, so your connectivity to that is going to be very good. Going out to SaaS apps, again, most of those are in the same public cloud data centers that we're hosting this service in, which, to be perfectly open and honest, is riding on GCP and AWS. So when your traffic enters Prisma Access, you are riding on Google Express Fiber. And so your connectivity worldwide becomes very good, typically much better than what you can get from the average internet provider. So we actually see situations where customers pick this offering up, looking at it for the security services that it provides in kind of a global or even a regional manner, and then just finding all of these extra benefits of, wow, my connectivity for my users, is so much better now because of the network that I'm riding on. And being able to egress a user that is out of the country to the internet in their native language, all of these things just start adding up to a really great user experience. And that's really important to make sure that security stays enabled, because if it's a bad user experience, the users turn it off if they can, right? So making sure it's a good user experience is very important. But again, the whole idea here, we feed all the traffic to Prisma Access. Prisma Access is optimized to be able to forward that traffic to its end destination in the most efficient manner possible. So we have that good user experience and also very good security efficacy. Now, speaking to some of the kind of the items there listed in that security service layer, this is where, going back to the previous presentation, defense in depth really becomes key, right? So not just defense in depth from, hey, I've got a security product on my endpoint, I've got a security product in the network, and I've got a security product in the cloud, but going beyond that and saying, okay, I've got security in the network, but that's actually 10 layers deep, right, of security that is very efficiently running on a single platform. So that's something that's very important to call out as well. So I mentioned that this is a global product. There are well over 100 locations throughout the world. So traffic from a particular region can typically onboard to this network very quickly. And from there, again, you're riding those enormous provider backbones and able to provide really good connectivity worldwide. So I want to talk about a couple of use cases, mobile user and also remote office. We're going to start with the mobile user use case. Again, going back to VPN is designed for access to private resources is, in Palo Alto Network's opinion and in my personal opinion, a little bit of a flawed way of thinking. We should be looking at VPN as a way to secure user traffic regardless of where they go through the world. So we have this perimeterless workforce now. We do need a way to ensure that the corporate controls that we would have inside of the office apply to those users regardless of where they go. And that's what Prisma Access is really aimed at. How do we secure those users no matter where they're at? Now that can be done through the VPN, which is the preferred method because that secures all traffic. And then we also have proxy-based connectivity if it was desired, but that would be something we would recommend less as a connectivity method. But again, thinking about how the industry has changed and how users' traffic flows have changed, now instead of going back into private data centers and things, typically they're headed out to public cloud, SaaS, or just typical internet-based sites. That's where the majority of the traffic is going now. So having a service like this provides that good user experience because you're not hairpinning the traffic back into your own offices or your own data centers just to go right back out to the web and perhaps increasing the latency for that user. Instead, now you're coming into an infrastructure that is directly peered with those major services and often resides in the same data centers as those services and becomes very, very fast. So on the left, what we had was exactly what I described, users connecting into your office or to your data center and then hairpinning right back out to go out to public cloud, SaaS, or internet. So the way Prisma Access changes this model and the way SASE is designed to work is now users connect to a service that already exists in the cloud. Think of it as a firewall as a service. And now they can tie back into your data centers for that private access if needed, because Prisma Access is already hooked to it and aware of it, or they can egress directly out to the internet for whatever they need. So the concerns of what if I overwhelm my bandwidth in the office? What if I overwhelm the firewall resource in the office? All of those things just go away. Those aren't concerns anymore because you're in a service that will scale essentially infinitely in the cloud. Speaking to the user experience, we introduced autonomous DEM, or digital experience monitoring, into this offering. So now we have the ability to say, user A calls up and says, I'm having a really poor experience. Application X is very slow. Okay, well, how many variables are in play here for that user? A million, right? Who knows what's going on inside their home Wi-Fi? Who knows what ISP they're on? What's the quality of the circuit? How many hops do they have to that application? Is the application itself having an issue, right? There's so many variables in play here that it's very hard to troubleshoot. And so what this digital experience monitoring aims to do is provide you metrics in each of those hops along the way to help you to understand, well, does the user have 95 Chrome tabs open and their laptop's glowing and about to melt because it's completely out of resources? Maybe, right? This will tell you that. Is their Wi-Fi completely overwhelmed because everybody's at home and they're all doing something online all at the same time, and the infrastructure just can't happen? Maybe this will tell you that. So each of these orange dots that you see on the screen is kind of a point of measurement where it's checking each hop along the way between the actual host itself and the end destination. What does that path look like? And where does the latency come into play? So it really helps to give you some great tools to understand, why is the user experience bad and where is the slowdown occurring, so that you can more quickly rectify it, hopefully, right? So moving on to the branch and retail kind of use case, this is less about the user now and more about the office. How do I tie my offices together? And the principle is really the same. The challenges are a little different, right? MPLS is very expensive. It takes forever to get stood up at a new location and things like that. And the internet in general has gotten better, right? Where it's more reliable. We have less, kind of bandwidth restrictions and things out there. Traffic typically flows very well. I mean, we've been doing voice calls over the internet for years and years and years now, and that increased exponentially over the last year, and it's typically good, right? There's issues along the way, but typically good. So the ability to leverage traditional internet has also become very realistic for businesses and typically far less expensive than MPLS. And of course, that's what brought about SD-WAN technologies and that kind of thing. But as we look to how that relates to Prisma Access, it's really the simplification of connectivity. If you look at the left, this is maybe what we used to do or still do in many cases. We connect our offices, over MPLS, and we connect our data centers into that same MPLS mesh. And maybe the offices have direct internet access, maybe they don't. Maybe they have to come through the data center to get internet access. But this flow on the left represents really the way we have done it and the way a lot of folks are still doing it. And if we look at the right, when we leverage Prisma Access, it really looks the same as the user option, right? Or the user use case. The only thing that's changed now is at the bottom, instead of tying an individual user in, we've tied an entire office in. So this might be tied in with an SD-WAN product or a firewall. The point is, anything that's IPsec capable can tie that office into Prisma Access now and provide that robust security offsite. So, I think the key takeaways here from this very high level presentation is, when you're looking at secure access service edge or any kind of firewalling as a service, Prisma Access truly is one of the only offerings out there that will secure all traffic on all ports, all applications at all times, no matter where the user goes, kind of an always on solution, able to secure everything that will scale essentially infinitely, because again, this is not running on our infrastructure in our data center. This is running in public cloud and has the scale of public cloud, which again is essentially infinite. So really good from that perspective, and then a very heavy focus on that end user experience to make sure that the offering works well, that it is nearly invisible to the user when configured properly so that they don't want to turn it off. And we consume this ourselves internally, of course, and we've got a lot of customers here locally in my market that are leveraging it now. And it's great. It doesn't get in the way. It's a good user experience and allows you to provide the security that you would want to when the users are in the office, again, kind of regardless of where they're at. So with that, I appreciate your time. Again, any questions, please drop them into the Q&A, and I'd be happy to answer at the end here when we get looking at that. Appreciate it. Turn the time over to the folks with, I've forgotten the name. I'm very sorry.
Perfect. Awesome. Thank you, Landon. Appreciate it. That was great. And whether you're an existing Palo Alto network customer and haven't explored Prisma, or if it's the Palo Alto is new to you, just let your Sanity team know, and we'll make sure to connect you with your team. So with that, we will pass the mic over to Stefan and Jacob with our friends at Evolve.
Muted. Awesome. Now, thank you, Keith. There. Sorry about that. I think I was muted. Let me pull up these slides again. And again, as Keith mentioned, my name is Jacob Fernong. I am with Evolve Security here, and going to touch on a little bit more on the high level of who we are and the services we can provide. I know we are, I think, last on the schedule here, so I'll keep it short and sweet, and then also kick it over to Stefan Dorn as well to touch on a couple things. But let me pull up this next slide here. And again, as Tom had mentioned there, our core values really do align well with Sanity Solutions there, and further adds to our partnership. And we feel that we, as Evolve Security, are truly more of an extension of the services they provide as it relates to IT security in that regard. Evolve Security, we are very much so a technology-driven cybersecurity services as well as cybersecurity training firm here. And this slide gives a bit of an overview into each component to who we are. We are based and headquartered in Chicago, Illinois here. As you'll see, again, there's a few different components to the services that we can help with and assist and further provide. Starting at the top there, the Evolve Academy. This is really our world-class #1 ranked cybersecurity training that we can provide and offer there, whether that be more business to consumer training. We are actually authorized training partners with Offensive Security and do provide training for individuals looking to go into a career in cybersecurity and really train the next generation of cybersecurity professionals and individuals. And then the other side of that is we do provide also more business to business training and enterprise training in that sense to further upskill and reskill individuals, whether that be company-wide training for all employees or more specialized and customized IT technical training as well there. So that's the first component. Then the second component to the services we can further assist with and provide would be our Evolve Talent and Advisory, which truly is more of our unique cybersecurity staffing with our senior level oversight as part of that. With the individuals that have gone through our Evolve Security certified training, we have a deep pool of candidates and alumni that we can really plug and play into different organizations looking to grow and bolster their IT security team internally. And then again, as part of that, we actually layer on the senior level oversight as well as part of that on top. And then the last component would be our Evolve Labs. And this is truly more of our technical team of expert engineers and consultants helping to deliver world-class offensive security services. And the main component and really more of our bread and butter in that regard would be our managed penetration testing, where we work with a wide range and variety of organizations, and we definitely recommend operating more in this managed approach, where we're combining the automated vulnerability scanning and tooling there, as well as coming back and performing more continuous and cyclical manual penetration assessments throughout the year. Of course, because we feel having a continuous pulse on the network as any changes are coming up is certainly more beneficial than just your one-time assessments being done, once every 365 days or what have you there. So, and then really with every service and training that we're providing, we put a big emphasis on being technology driven again there, whether it's the best of breed tools that we're using to perform these assessments, or the a couple different in-house custom built platforms, as you'll see here, the Darwin Attack platform that we're using with the technical services and assessments that we're providing, or our Cyber Lab in-house built learning management system there with the training that we provide. So this next slide here, again, I'll touch on a little bit more with our Darwin Attack platform and how we use that with our technical services and most often our penetration testing as part of that. Really, this is a client-facing portal that we use. So organizations get uploaded in this portal, and it's a really easy way to view and track all of the findings from the assessments we're doing in terms of the vulnerabilities. Organizations can log in and view in near real time the findings from our assessments, and which assets those were located on, and risk ranked accordingly as well. And then the other component would be how we are further able to provide remediation validation support through this portal, and communicate back and forth in terms of the remediation efforts. And at the end of the day, really make sure that the overall security posture is being improved again at the end of the day there. So this next slide is the last one I'll touch on, and again just gives a sense on further how our platform complements our assessments. You'll see there in the top right a brief screenshot of what that looks like, and then how we're breaking down the results. And again, working to understand it and view those results again just in more of a digestible fashion, and being as transparent as possible with the findings and how, our recommended remediation for implementing those, again as part of assessments. So with that, I'm actually going to kick it over to Stefan Dorn. Stefan is our Director of Security Solutions. I'll let him further introduce himself and talk a little bit more on securing the remote workforce here.
All right, thanks, Jacob. I'm starting a stopwatch here because I've got about an hour's worth of content that I'm going to try to cram into 4 or 5 minutes. Real quick, I'm Stefan Dorn. I'm the Director of Security Services at Evolve Security. So I largely manage the Evolve Labs team that focuses on the offensive security services we provide. And I also interface with our staffing and advisory team to help steer methodology and just dealing with various kind of custom projects that we get into on that side of the house. My background is I started out in IT infrastructure for about 15 years and then transitioned into a focus on professional consulting with information security and cybersecurity. I cut my teeth in the banking industry. I've worked in the manufacturing industry, and I've worked with a whole lot of folks since then in healthcare and other verticals as well. So let's dive right in. We'll skip past the overview page, Jacob, if you don't mind, since you're here. So we wanted to talk about kind of 6 areas of risk that we've seen in the last year, given the pandemic and everything. I actually gave a talk last March that was fairly similar, and we've learned some things since then and dealt with some incident response and things like that, where we've added a little bit more material to what we're seeing and what we want to make sure people kind of consider. So hopefully these spawn some ideas for you. And if you have concerns in any of these areas, be happy to talk later offline or add more color and background to what we're talking about here. So the first section, talking about your help desk and your security team and how remote workforce, especially in a pandemic scenario, is impacted by that. If we can move on to that slide. Thank you. Real quick, there's an additional support load, of course, when you're looking at a remote workforce versus in the office. There's other challenges. You may be riding on some technology that you don't have full control over. Some of it's user-based technology, like a home router, things like those. They can be problematic from both a security standpoint and just an availability standpoint. So as your remote population increases, as we're seeing the trend, pandemic or not, that trend is on its way. You got to consider making sure you have enough staff and throughput and technology to just adequately support these people from a help desk and security team standpoint. Third-party support also becomes a concern. Not quite yet. Critical service providers, understanding their support limitations, especially this is more of a pandemic-specific kind of issue, where we've seen some providers have backlogs that they're trying to get through because they have less staff because of the pandemic and things like that. So factors like that are important to consider. Who owns the devices that are accessing your information in your systems, right? And really assessing what risks might that create with your specific organization and the material information you're working with. Of course, the increased security monitoring requirements, you have to look at more because there's more technology at play with people, coming in from the internet from somewhere to your organization's assets or information. And really that comes down to what Atom said is visibility. We continue to see a major visibility issue across almost any industry. Some people are doing pretty well with it, and others are completely blind to certain types of traffic, where that's the largest portion of traffic these days is encrypted traffic. So making sure you can investigate and log and monitor and alert on those kind of important facets is really strong piece to have in your security program to effectively manage that and deal with incident response. We can jump on to the next slide. We've covered some of these other topics already. Mobile device security, also very important. That includes laptops, right? I'd say today it's a little less important in the pandemic with people a little less mobile. Everything's kind of static and at home. So we're seeing less laptop theft issues and things like that. But that's coming back because we're almost out of this thing, hopefully. So making sure you're using full disk encryption on laptops, pre-boot pins so that if somebody does get that laptop, they can't boot it up and steal keys out of memory and still access the data. So following best practices with things like that. Make sure you're patching. A good overall band-aid for a lot of this is like a mobile device management solution or some kind of endpoint management solution that's holistic and covers a lot of these bases to keep it simple from the management perspective. And then the zero trust comments earlier and discussion about that. Minimum trust, it's a pinnacle of security. Keep it simple. Only give permissions to what is absolutely necessary if possible. That's not always the easiest thing to accomplish, but it's a huge factor that also gives you more resiliency against things like 0 days, which no amount of patching can necessarily prevent happening if you're impacted by them. Let's move on to the next slide, just keeping an eye on the time here. Home office considerations, physical security becomes a real thing there too. If you're dealing with paperwork, files on a case maybe, or things like that, things that have to be printed and stored or whatever, or any kind of records, you need to protect those if they're at your end user's home or something like that, or a remote location. The sharing of systems used to access, some organizations we're seeing they're using remote access utilities, but they're just installing it on the home user's desktop or laptop, and their kids might use it at night for school or video games or whatever. That's a new risk, right, that you got to factor in and control for if you're allowing access from those machines. Patch management, of course, of home devices and the home network becomes important as well. And confidentiality, always a big factor there. And where they're working from, can people see through the windows? Is it an apartment on a street level, right? Where some information may be exposed. Those are factors you want to consider with work from home policies and things like that. Let's jump to the next one here. Okay, we covered a lot of these already. Password management tools are extremely beneficial, and we see that starting to steer people's habits into better password selection and how they share credentials if they have to. Reminders to change them, all of that. Those password management tools are finally getting people kind of on the rails in the right direction. Strongly suggest considering them if you're not using them broadly in your organization. Multi-factor authentication is like the #1 thing I could recommend. If anybody's not doing it for VPNs, Outlook web access, any kind of remote access to systems on the internet, you got to have multi-factor on there. I'd say it's similar to driving a car around without wearing your seatbelt. If you're doing that stuff without some form of strong multi-factor authentication in your authentication processes. We've covered all this other stuff a little bit already, so I'm going to move on to the next slide. Connectivity and communications considerations. So the VPN itself, very important that you harden it, follow best practices, read the manual on how to harden it, and understand what features are available there to you. An assessment can help, find some of those things as well, is another good way to validate what you're doing. We talked about home networks. A real risk that we've seen in some cases when we've been doing investigations, compromised systems on the home network that aren't your user systems, but it's another system living on the network used to attack the other system. So you need to treat the zero trust kind of perspective is super beneficial for those kinds of threats. And then I think one of the other main things besides use MFA, please, would be remote desktop protocol. Don't expose it to the internet right now if it's the Microsoft one. There's just been too many zero-day attacks and things like that in the last few years where our trust for it is fairly low. So it's much better to put that stuff behind like a VPN or otherwise not expose it directly to the internet. Let's jump to the next one. And I won't talk too much about this, but this is one I always throw in there is plan ahead. It always pays off. The statistics show it. The less expensive way is do your diligence, get your plans in place and rehearse them with your team so that when stuff does happen, you're ready to go and you get it solved quickly and efficiently. Otherwise, when you have to bring in external consulting and teams to do forensics and things to that extent, it can get very expensive very fast, and it's not fun for anybody. So, if there are firms like us that can definitely help stand this stuff up and rapidly do that, and train your team so that you guys can take care of the care and feeding from that point forward, would be my recommendation if you're not sure of where to start. I think that's everything. We have a couple resources we included here, so if you want to jump to that slide, Jacob. I'm not sure if we're sharing the files later or whatever, but you can grab a screenshot otherwise too. SANS and NIST have some great stuff that they put out right when the pandemic hit and have had out before then too for best practices on the stuff we're talking about today. So some good pro tips there and good resources for you. And with that, I went over my time a little bit, apologize, but now I'm done. So thank you for your time.
All right, great. Thanks, guys, and thanks for bearing with us. We're trying some new formatting here and whatnot, but now for the fun part. So Amanda, thank you for joining us. Thanks for getting the bottles out to everybody. The stage is yours, and now for the fun part, thanks for your patience, team. And I'm going to open it up for people to be able to interact here. Thanks for working with us on the panelists. Now we'll open up attendees so you can ask questions and interact here. So Amanda, all yours.
Thank you. Yeah, my pleasure. Hey, everybody. If you have questions, I love them. So feel free to put anything in chat. I know we're a little short on time, so if you don't want to waste a minute, feel free to go ahead and pour the little 50 ml if you got that of our courage and conviction. If you don't, there's no problem moving into the cider cask finish. But I'll talk a little bit about myself and then I'll dive into the whiskey. I am Amanda Beckwith, the Education Manager, Blender, and Head of the Sensory Panel at Virginia Distillery Company. And I am the second oldest employee here by duration, not age. But we turned on these stills back in 2015. And if you haven't had a single malt, we have it really easy in a sense. Our mash bill is 100% malted barley. And if you have had single malts, you might be thinking of Scotch whiskey, but this is not like that at all. So we are the largest independently owned American single malt producer, and it's a pretty new category in the nation. So it's exciting to be doing something that has been around for centuries. The word whiskey comes from the phrase for water of life. In Scotland, the Gaelic, it was ushkiva. And in Ireland, the Gaelic, it was also ushkiva. But over time, language gets slurred and blurred, and the word for water, ushki, got anglicized. So if you happen to be taking the Irish spelling, it would be W-H-I-S-K-E-Y, and then the Scottish spelling did not have that E. So if you wonder why sometimes you see whiskey with an E or without, the roots are right back there. And the stills behind me, the double copper pot stills, they were made in Scotland for us. There's a beautiful spirit safe, a mash tun, all these things were there. But our theme is old world meets new. So we do a lot of things the old fashioned way. But the Virginia climate is pretty insane, so it makes for some really unique whiskey that we love. So if you haven't been to Virginia, we'd love to have you out to visit us, and if you have, we're coming back. We do tours and tastings when it's post-COVID, whether we're going to be reopening to our bottling house so people can walk in and see all that. But when we were getting started, we knew that we needed to work with our climate. And so our mentor, Dr. Jim Swan, he was a Scottish whiskey expert who traveled the world and came up with some really great ideas, told us, you know, Virginia is a 4-season subtropical climate, so you've got to work with those crazy swings. And so he gave us the idea that, you know, whiskey is a distilled spirit made from water, yeast, and grain. Of course, our grain is barley, which is the best grain. It does the best job at converting enzymes over, which you got to have something that has sugar. If you don't have sugar, you can't make alcohol. So you probably see some big silver tanks behind me. Those are fermentation tanks, and that's where the magic happens. So we take the barley, we grind it, we add hot water to extract the sugar, and then the sugary water goes into a fermentation tank. That's where we add yeast. Yeast gobbles up the sugar, and over a period of 3 days, we make beer. We don't sell beer, but that's what we start out doing. So if you guys like beer, and maybe you've had a Belgian or Saison, like a farmhouse ale, think of something like that. When I walk back through those tanks and inhale, I get banana nut bread, tropical fruit, like peaches and apricots. It's really delicious. We just know, hey, it's going to be even better after we distill it. So we then distill twice, first in one still, then the other, to concentrate the alcohol. So it starts out as like a 7 or 8% alcohol beer. It goes up to almost 70% or higher alcohol. And that's just getting started. So if you're making a vodka or gin or rum, you could be done by now, but we have years to go. So our whiskey has been aging since 2015. And our motto is, we let the whiskey tell us when it's ready. And we use 3 different types of barrels to age our whiskey. Former bourbon casks. So bourbon is made with at least 51% corn and aged in charred oak. It can be made anywhere in the United States. You can even have it in Hawaii if you wanted. And yeah, sorry if you didn't all get this bottle, but we'll figure that out and make sure you do get to try some. So this one is aged in bourbon casks, sherry casks from Spain, and these cuvee wine casks that also came from Spain. And if you've been to Scotland or Ireland, you probably know the weather's pretty consistent. It can be maybe a 3 or 4 degree variance by day if you're up in the Highlands. And it's much more extreme here in Virginia. We have these highs of 75, 76 degrees right now, and then we're down into the 20s overnight. So in hot weather, barrel staves expand and soak up the spirit, and in cold weather, they contract and push it back out. And whiskey, when it comes off the stills, is clear. It looks like water. It's in that breathing in and out that it gets the color and flavor very naturally. So if you guys haven't smelled it yet, I recommend doing a nosing first. Now this is 92 proof. Any one of these whiskeys is going to be that same 92 proof or 46% ABV. And roughly 70% of your sense of taste comes from smelling. So if somebody just shoots back a whiskey and it's a good one, it kind of breaks my heart because there's so much there. So I definitely recommend doing a little drive-by, opening your mouth and inhaling a little bit, see what aromas you're getting. And for me, right off the bat, I get a little vanilla and some caramel and toffee. Going a little further, there's some orange in there, which is really nice, like an orange zest or orange oil. And I mentioned bourbon casks before. Those are kind of like our foundational casks. So they really contribute those notes right there. Going further, there's a little bit of this fig, plum. It's like a rich, fruity note that I really love. A little honey, maybe even honey nut Cheerios comes to mind. And whatever notes you guys are getting, you're not wrong. Everybody's sense of smell can be a little bit different, definitely described differently. You have different memories tied to your first experiences with things. I did a tasting once, and this one guy had been very quiet, and I was asking him, like, what aromas do you get? And he hadn't said a word at all this whole time, and he said, I smell my grandfather. He started to cry, and he'd forgotten his grandfather loved to drink whiskey, and he remembered like hugging him in his coat, and it was like this whole breakthrough. And that's part of the power of whiskey. It's one of those things you make memories, share with friends, and it transports you somewhere. So for me, I definitely connected to food I've had, and just moments and memories of having really good whiskeys. I remember drinking whiskey with a lemon crumb bar and feeling like this is the moment I'm on my porch, I never want to leave. So hopefully you guys get connections like that with the aromas. Shades going down. For me also, you might get some toasted pecan or chocolate notes, maybe even something like a red fruit, like raspberry or even bright cherry. And those I like to credit to what I call cuvee wine casks. And they're kind of crazy, being attacked by shades. So these are our secret sauce barrels. and they were created in Spain, held that great wine blend, and then the inside of the stave was shaved, toasted with indirect heat, blasted with the char, and then brought back up and made together. So that contributes some really incredible aromas. Our mentor, Jim Swan, created that type of cask, so pretty fun. If you guys have questions about this whiskey, let me know. We also have a website called batch.info. So if you want to know a little bit more, you can go there. We selected 37 different barrels for our first cask piece. And so 21 of those were whiskeys aged in former bourbon casks, 10 in those Cuvée wine casks, and 6 in sherry casks. And it's really fun to work with those different ones. Yeah, that is the first whiskey that I have to try. The second one is pretty unique too. This is a cider cask finished whiskey. So a lot of distilleries, when they're getting up and running, they have pressure, you know, right off the bat, release something like a vodka or a gin that you can sell. And we knew we loved barley. We thought this is the grain we love. We want to talk about that. So we brought over a whiskey that had been distilling and aging for at least 6 years, 6, 8, 12-year barrels we picked from this distillery in Scotland. And then we married it with our own whiskey that was distilled and aged here in Virginia. And it was really fun to kind of pick the whiskeys and combine them. Most of you who are whiskey drinkers probably have had your share of blended whiskeys. Maybe you've had Johnny Walker or Dewar's or Famous Grouse. Those have 30 to 40 different whiskeys in every bottle, which is crazy. And most of those are grain whiskeys made in big column stills and maybe one single malt thrown in, because single malt barley is the most expensive to work with. And so it's a premium grain. So they have those to play around with. Most people don't know this, but the original whiskey makers were farmers. They needed a way to preserve their grain, so they would distill it. But they weren't salesmen. They wouldn't sell it to people. They would sell it to a local grocery store, and the grocers were the blenders. They would combine all the different local farmers' whiskeys together into a fairly consistent blend and then sell that. So if the name Dewar sounds familiar, well, he was originally a grocer, Dewar and Sons. So it's kind of fun to know the roots of whiskey. Our blended whiskey is nothing like that. It's just two whiskeys coming together. So we kind of think of it like a marriage. We've got the old world whiskey meeting the new world whiskey, and then there are 2 little spikelets in the middle. Virginia is the 10th state, spikelets on the barley. We then move the whiskey into another cask to finish for at least 10 months, usually a year, to really integrate those 2 whiskeys. So cider is something that's really huge in Virginia. It's fun because we're surrounded by orchards. In fact, I'm on 100 acres right here in Livingston, Virginia, and there are still apple trees scattered through the whole woods behind me, which is amazing. And this used to be this big farmers market hub where people would come by and trade throughout the day. So it's a really rich story, and Virginia has some incredible cideries. In fact, if you've ever had Laird's Applejack Apple Brandy, they make their apple brandy about 9 miles away from me in North Garden, Virginia. They are based in New Jersey, but all the juice is happening right here. So when these cideries are done with their barrels, they can trade with us. So we've given our barrels to local cideries like Potter's Cider in Charlottesville and Buskey Cider in Richmond, and they've aged their cider in our whiskey casks and made some delicious ciders. When they're done, they've given the barrels back to us, and we've moved the 2 whiskeys in together to finish. So if you're nosing this whiskey and getting green apple, some pear, maybe some toasted pecan, a little cinnamon or vanilla, it's really just because of those barrels. The same ingredients are in this as in the other whiskey. It's water, yeast, and barley. It's only the impact of the barrel that will change it. And so again, I recommend just doing a little drive-by nosing and healing. If you've never done a whiskey tasting before, you might want to get your palate used to the fact that this is a 92 proof whiskey. So maybe do a little priming sip on the tip of your tongue just to go, oh yeah, this is what that is. And when you're ready, maybe take another sip and let it all work its way over your tongue. When I was younger, I was told, you've got different spots on your tongue for different taste buds. And really there are clusters all over your tongue. So whiskey has a story to tell. So getting more of it to work its way over your tongue, you can even do like a little chewing motion or inhale a little bit, let the oxygen mix in. And that's going to give you so many stories, which is really great. If you want to add water, heck yes, you can do that. In Scotland, they call that releasing the serpent. So if you're a wine drinker, you might be used to swirling your glass around. You can swirl whiskey if you want, but all you're really going to get an idea of is the viscosity of it, how thick it is, maybe an idea of what the sugar content is, but it's not going to do much for you. But adding that drop or two of water, you're playing chemist, and you are oxidizing it and opening it up then, so you might find softer and has more vanilla. So definitely feel free to play around with that. Once you add ice, on the rocks, absolutely. Just know that the ice is going to cool down your whiskey, and that coldness can sometimes mute the aroma, so you won't get as much out on the nose. And also over time, ice is going to melt, and that's going to dilute into your whiskey, so just know what to expect. You like cocktails? I think it's fun to find cocktails that really support the notes already in the whiskey. So this one, I like the baked apple on the palate with cinnamon. It's like a long, lingering cinnamon finish. So if we were to make a brown sugar simple syrup, maybe equal parts water and brown sugar on the stove top, throw in a cinnamon stick. That would be a really fun way to start with this. And then if you wanted to play around by adding bitters, you could kind of build a cocktail from the ground up there. So there's a lot you can do with it, which is really fun, but I do love it as a neat sipping whiskey. This one, Whiskey Advocate got their hands on it, and in 2018, they made it lucky number 13 in the top 20 whiskeys of the year, and we've been selling out ever since. So it's really great to have this. We have made 7 different batches of it already, and we're working on batch 8. So it is really unique. There's an Irish distillery, Tullamore Dew, that has a cider cask finished whiskey, but they're mostly discontinued because they can't find any cider casks. Being in Ireland, it's hard for them to build relationships with local cideries sometimes. But if you're ever traveling internationally and happen to find one, maybe at a duty-free place, you should try it. I like ours better, but it's still really, really good. Any questions or thoughts? Yes.
Just curious, the cider cask definitely is rare. Yeah, I can't say I've seen it before. Is that kind of one of your signature? I mean, I know the Courage and Conviction is kind of your mainstream like go-to, but is that cider one pretty unique?
Yeah, the cider is very unique. There are a couple of distilleries who've reached out to us and said, hey, how do you do that? We want to get on board. So it's fun to be kind of cutting edge there. And people love it. It's won, I think, 9 gold medals already. And it's just one of our limited releases that we do once a year. So
are there other like limited releases you got that are kind of hard to find? I know the whiskey underground world is so crazy and everybody wants those hard to find bottles. So what are your exotic ones?
Yeah, our flagship from this line is a port cask finish, and that's not too hard to find. It's One World Whiskey Awards Best in Category. Every year we've entered it. But we also did a beer finished one. We gave our barrels to a local brewery, and they did a wee heavy style ale in it and gave it back to us. And it's got these great mocha notes, a little earthy chocolate going on. If you can find one of those, they're rare. They sold out very quickly. But we had a couple that were in like a shipping distributor area for a while and just got released in New York and I think Illinois. So there's a chance those are still floating out in market. Just a couple bottles left. And then we did a Chardonnay finished one that also is completely sold out. It sold out of Virginia the year we released it in like 10 months. But there's a chance a couple were held at distributors. So you might find one or two. And I love that. So we actually are aging our American single malt in mostly the 3 cask types I talked about, but we have a couple experimentals. And down the road, we're going to do a Chardonnay aged American single malt release. So it's kind of crazy.
That has to be fun to just be able to experiment with different barrels and aging processes. And it probably, where you're at in Virginia probably has a bearing with the moisture levels and the temperatures and everything else.
Oh, yeah. You're exactly right. Our humidity is crazy. So in that breathing in and out process where we get the color and flavor and all the depth, we also have the heartbreaking side, and that's evaporation. So in Scotland, they lose 1% to 2% out of a barrel a year. Our first year, we saw losses over 10%. Thankfully, it's gone down a little bit, so we're at like 4% loss a year, but that means that 1 year aging here is equivalent to 4 or 5 years aging in Scotland. So we could wait, 40 years and have, even less than that, have bone dry barrels. So it's just a different, it's not even a level playing field. And the humidity is something too. We have sensors in our cask houses. I've got 2 massive cask houses that hold roughly 6,000 casks in each of them. We have sensors placed around to track things like humidity pockets and thermal banding. And it's funny because in that breathing in and out, you might have alcohol evaporating. You also have water coming in. And so we kind of have this natural reduction inside our casks. So pretty cool.
I call that the angel share or whatever.
Yes. We have greedy angels.
Yeah, right. Just a quick question from the team. Looks like somebody was wondering, do you guys give, well, and maybe in normal times, do you guys give tours at your distillery?
Yes. Yeah, head to our website, vadistillery.com, and we're planning to reopen for tours this spring. So once the vaccines are rolled out, we are ready to hit the ground running. And the tour typically goes through our distillery. You can see the milling room and the distillery floor, but also the bottling house, which is one of my favorite parts. We've got this big glass wall, and you can see the whole line going, and it's great. We also have a whiskey museum, so you can learn about the history of whiskey in the area. And a lot of people don't know this, but George Washington was quite the distiller. So his farm manager was a Scottish farmer, barley for the 4 largest Scottish distilleries in the mid-1700s. So he came over and convinced Washington to start a distillery, and was all set to make single malt, but the rocky ground at Mount Vernon was not so good for single malt, and they ended up growing more rye, which is true. That's how bourbon became so big in this country. Corn just grew easier and was cheaper, just like rye versus barley. So lots of history.
And anybody, if you're able to unmute, go ahead and feel free to chime in. But I got another question here on the Q&A, asking how many whiskeys do you guys produce? How many different whiskeys do you produce? And then how many gallons, or at what volume too?
Yes. So from an entire run, which is kind of crazy, it takes 5 to 6 days. We do tons of malted barley per run, and then we do the fermentation for 3 days, and we double distill. That whole process can take 5 to 6 days. And from the 2 tons of barley, we get 5, maybe 6 full barrels. That's it. So we double distill every day, which keeps us, really busy. And we make 5 different products on our main line. So we have, actually, it's not true, 6 now. We have the cider and port that we do every year. And we also do our flagship Courage and Conviction. We also do line extensions that show the 3 different ones. So we do about 460 cases of each of the line extensions, and about 1,500 cases of the flagship, and about 1,500 cases of the port cask finish, and maybe 600 cases of the cider in a year.
And how many different?
It's been going up every year, so it's been growing.
And how many different bottles at any given time? You've got maybe a dozen different types of whiskey, or 8 or 10?
Yeah, we also do a cask strength release once a year. And this year it's going to be that cuvee wine cask finish. So we're selecting 5 or 6 casks to start out with. They'll be released late fall. And at cask strength, it means it's going to be really cool. So there'll be a sticker on each bottle that has the cask number. And we'll probably start talking about that. You can follow us on Facebook or Instagram, or just our website, vadistillery.com. But we'll start talking about that as it gets closer, and all the new releases always go out on there. So it's kind of fun. And if you like cocktails, we also have all the cocktails on our website too. So want to get some ideas for ways to use these whiskeys. I like them neat, and they've won a lot of awards neat, but it's also fun to play around a little bit.
Sure.
Amanda, my name is Jason. Can we buy your whiskeys in Colorado, or do we can buy it if we order directly from the distillery?
Yes, you can. So by law, Virginia is a control state. So we have Prohibition era laws still in place. And one of the ones that came off right after Prohibition ended here was the state controls all the liquor in Virginia. So in order for me to sell it, I have to be a licensed ABC store right here, which is crazy. So our distillery is Virginia ABC store 016. The good news is, even though I can't send it to any other state, we have an online retail partner, Mash and Grape. So if you go to our website and hit shop online, you'll have 2 options. One is Shop Virginia and one is Shop Nationwide. And if you click Shop Nationwide, it takes you to the Mash and Grape website. And they're just an online retail partner that finds local liquor stores and works with them to ship to 40+ states. So that's how any whiskey would go to you all. It would go through Mash and Grape to one of those liquor stores, and there you go. You can also, if you happen to have liquor stores in your area, you can check on our website. There's a whiskey finder. You can put in your zip code and see what's around that would have it.
Great, thank you.
My pleasure.
Another question on the board. What makes the Courage and Conviction? Like, why is that your signature bottle? Like, what makes it different from your competitors or from other distilleries?
Yeah, I love that. Our founder, Dr. George Moore, was this Irishman, and he had a saying for every occasion, and one of them was "Have the courage of your convictions." So we really took that to heart, and we thought we want to make a whiskey that we know is really just quality from the very get-go. So not only was it the stills we used, the yeast we used, the grain we used 2-row spring barley, working with lots of local farmers, and it's just the process all the way through the barrels we select. We just wanted to do everything exactly right. Even the whole motto of "we let the whiskey tell us when it's ready." So all those different ingredients coming together, especially those cuvee wine casks, really do set us apart. The other thing is the climate. If you guys are fans of Scotch, you probably are very familiar with the fact that there are different Scotch regions. And you know that if you're going to have a lowland or Campbelltown, it's going to be different from a highland or Speyside or even an Islay. And I mean, the United States is so much larger than Scotland. It's crazy. So there are a handful of new American single malt producers. If you haven't had them, my favorites are Balcones down in Texas. You'll see a loud and proud #1 on their label because they only age their whiskey for a year. Waco, Texas is crazy. It's incredibly hot and dry, so they could go longer and you feel like you were sipping on a 2x4. So it's just a very different style and it's very dramatic. So I think what sets us apart is the fact that we don't use new charred oak, we use used oak. And that means we aren't masking all the notes that you get from fermentation. So all those esters, like I mentioned banana custard when I was talking about the one type of cask, the former bourbon cask, because it's so light, or candied pineapple, that's still going to be there. And you also still get that malty consistency. So if any of you are Japanese whiskey fans, that's kind of what inspired me. I've always loved Japanese single malt because it's so nuanced and layers. There's a lot of complexity. So I can sit with one of these whiskeys for an hour. I did a press tasting last week that lasted an hour and a half. And the writer was like, "I'm still getting new flavors. How am I getting chocolate now because it's been 40 minutes in? Or why am I suddenly getting toasted pecan?" And it's really fun to have that happen and suddenly then have this like, now there's the ginger coming through. So I want something playful and thoughtful and complex, but also something that makes you want to curl up with a dog and a good book on a rainy day. And I think that this whiskey really does that. It also makes me think of food all the time. I'm inspired by food when I'm up in the cask house and I'm thinking, all right, I want bacon wrapped dates and this, or I want baked brie with honey drizzled all over it and thin slices of Granny Smith apple and some candied pecans every time I drink this. So that's what inspires me and I think sets us apart.
Very cool. That's awesome. When were you? Go ahead.
Sorry, another question. Your courage and conviction.
Yeah.
So you call that, I'm looking at the bottle, American single malt whiskey. Is that the equivalent to Scotch single malt or Scotland single malt whiskey? Is that the naming convention, if you will?
Yeah. So whiskey is this massive umbrella, and you get bourbon under it and rye, and those have 51% corn for the bourbon or more in the mash bill, and same with rye being at least 51% rye or more. And then single malt means a single grain malted barley, but the single refers to the fact that it's distilled and aged at a single distillery. And for us, it's even bottled at a single distillery. So that's what the single is about. And then the Scotch would mean that it's distilled and aged in Scotland, whereas American, it's distilled and aged and bottled here. So that's really what sets it apart. The Scotch Whisky Association is very protective of the word Scotch. And we've always said, it's like a 4-letter word for us because we don't want people thinking that that's what we make. Part of it is because a lot of times when people hear Scotch, maybe the first time they had it, or if they even hear single malt, they might think of Scotch because that's where it really started. A lot of them have started out with a peated Scotch. And if you haven't had a peated whiskey, you'll know when you smell it, like a Lagavulin or Lafroig. It's very intense in your face. Some people describe it as medicinal, or words like seaweed or neosporin. I like it, but a little bit goes a long way. And so for us, what we bring over from Scotland might have a little tiny bit of it, like just a whiff, but it's not dominating at all. And nothing we make here is peated. So we don't want people thinking those flavors. We want them to get to know the grain and everything else too. Our style is more of like a Highland Scottish style if you were comparing it to one, but again, so different.
Great, thank you.
My pleasure.
Another question popped up. Since you guys are a distillery and you're set up to make, probably technically all types of liquor, are you guys Would you ever venture into like rum or even like a simple vodka or anything?
You know, barley is our love and single malt, so it's what we're all about. And so no, I think there's so much we can still do with just the different barrel types that we use, or playing around with different types of yeast and things like that. So for the foreseeable future, no. I think there are plenty of great vodkas out there and plenty of great rums and gins, but American single malt, there's nothing quite like what we do. So you're good at something, why not keep pursuing that and pushing to be better?
What year did you guys open your doors and start selling? 15?
Yeah, well, 2015 we turned on the stills and opened to the public, and we released our American blended malt, the two whiskeys married together. And then last April we finally released Courage and Conviction. So it's been almost a year since our flagship came out, and then this week we're releasing the line extensions. So they're slowly coming out to market. It'll be actually, I'll show you a sneak peek. 1 second. I mentioned the cuvee cask, sherry cask. They're gonna look like this, so kind of fun. And there's a bourbon cask one too that's green, so you can see my work lab over here. But yeah, that's what's up next, and we've been working on this for really 5.5 years.
That's awesome. It's got to be exciting to be like test lab almost, you know, just try different things. And I'd love to be the guinea pig, you know.
Right? Well, you guys need to come visit when we're reopened, and yeah, tour everything. Before I drop off, if you do think of questions later or have ideas, you can always email me. I'm amanda@vadistillery.com. And if you don't have time to write that down or forget it, just message us on Facebook and say, hey, this is for Amanda, and the team will know to get it to me. So.
Awesome. If you got time for one more, looks like another one popped up. What is cuvee?
Cuvee, yeah. So cuvee, sorry, it's backwards probably in the, it's our word. We love alliteration. So Courage and Conviction, cuvee cask sounded great. And most times when you hear cuvee, you might think of like champagne or something, but it means quality, and often it refers to the first run of a premium red wine blend that's made in Spain. They call that the cuvee. And so the barrels that we used to age this whiskey were all in Spain, premium red wine blends, and then the barrels were taken apart and the inside staves were shaved, toasted with indoor heat, blasted with the char, and recoopered back together. So that's really unique. Only a handful of distilleries have learned about this and are doing it right now. So we kind of think of that barrel as our secret sauce. So I'm pretty excited about it.
Very cool. Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Excellent. If anybody else wants to turn on your mic or submit any more questions, this has been great, Amanda. A lot of awesome information. We love learning about the complexity that whiskey has, so much that goes into it. So
my pleasure. Yeah, well, cheers to you guys, and don't hesitate to reach out if you've got questions. Blancha.
Thank you all.
Awesome. Good deal. Well, thanks, team. I know we went over. Appreciate everybody joining today. We'll keep you on the loop for our last call. But again, thanks for your time and attention. Have a great evening.
Thanks, Keith.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys. See ya.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.